Hello everyone, my name is Morteza Bashsiz. I am a Linux system engineer. At this series of videos, you are going to find out how to be a good Linux system engineer. So if you want to know, stay with me.
Welcome to LSE episode 11. At this episode, I'm going to talk about the structure of file system in Linux and also talking about the main points when you want to partition your operating system. So let's start it. Let's see how is the structure of file system in Linux. Linux supports POSIX standard in the file system structure, and it says that the structure of file system is a drop-down tree. It starts from a slash. So we have a slash, which is the 0 point, this first directory in your operating system, and everything is inside this directory. For example, directory 1, directory 2, file 1, file 2, and file 3, for example. And yeah, each directory may have their own subdirectories, like the 1, 1, the 1, 2, the 1, 3, and the 2, 1, the 2, 2, for example. And when you want to specify and when you want to define the exact path and exact location of a directory or a file in your operating system, imagine that I have another file here, file 131, for example, and I want to define the exact path of this file in my operating system. So the path and the location will be a string, contains the directories from root to this file separated by slash. So in this case it will be from slash directory 1, directory 13, and finally file 131. So it could be like this: slash d1 slash d13 slash f131. So this is the path of my file in my operating system. Let's see the structure of Linux in one distribution. For example, here I have Arch Linux. I'm using Arch in my desktop environment, and I'm going to run the tree command with L1 level 1 in directory slash. Then you can see that I have the slash directory at the first position, and then I have several directories under the slash directory which are making my operating system. And at the first part of this video, I am going to talk about the mindset behind these directories and what is exactly at these directories. In next episodes, I will talk about these directories in details, but at the moment, just about the concepts and to knowing that what are these directories. The first directory is bin and also spin. These directories contains the binary files which are in your operating system. Every command that you are running in your operating system and every program that you are using, for example, your browser, your screen recorder, and everything, must have a binary file somewhere in your operating system. And these directories are defined to keep these binary files by default. I mean, these are standards and these are protocols. There is no must, and it does not mean that you cannot find and you cannot define and build any binary in any other place in your operating system. You are free to use binaries everywhere that you want, but these are standards and protocols. And why we have bin and spin directories. The reason behind this mindset is that okay, we have some binaries that are really basic and are mandatory to use the operating system, and some of them are not mandatory. For example, your browser, okay, your operating system will work without your browser and no need to be in this directory, in bin directory. So you expect to find your spin at this directory. But some of the other commands like ls command, you will find it at this directory. At least you expect to see at this directory. But at this case, as you can see, bin and spin, both of them are pointed to usr bin directory. So in Arch Linux, everything is inside usr bin directory. So if I ask my Linux where is Firefox, okay, Firefox is in usr bin directory, and where is my ls command are in the same path, I mean. So this is Arch. But in another example, I have a Debian here. That if I ask, okay, where is ls? ls is in usr bin directory, or where is chroot? Chroot is in different directory. And if I execute the tree command, the same command here, you will see that bin and spin are pointed to different directories. So yeah, I mean, these are standards, but you may see some differences in different distributions. The next directory is boot, and everything that is mandatory for booting your operating system is under this directory, and I will talk about the boot process in Linux in next episodes. Dev directory contains files which belongs to devices that are connected to your system. Every hardware that is connected to your system and is detected by the operating system has a file inside this directory. And yeah, we have different type of files: character device and block device. etc directory contains the etc files and directories. By default and in theory, every configuration files that you can change them to configure your operating system and your services are at this directory. For example, if you install Nginx Apache, by default the config files will be config files and directories will be generated at this directory. So this is the default, and it does not mean that you cannot put your configurations in different directories. Okay. Home directory. Since Linux is a multi-user directory, then you may have different users for different persons, for example, or different users for different services. For example, you have a user www which controls your Apache or your Nginx and executes the binary files by the privilege of user www. Or in another case, you may have your different users for your browser, your family, and your, for example, you may have different users for your employees in your company and the others. So every user, each user at this directory must have a directory by its name, by the username. Here, if I run the ls in home directory, you can see that, yeah, I have two users, build and Morteza, which this is my own home directory. Lib directories contains the library files and library directories. Imagine that you want to write some data, some file on your disk with a Python program, and you need to call a syscall by your Python, then you need a library inside your to import inside your program to be able to interact with operating system and using the syscall. Okay, these type of libraries are existing at these directories, and you can see that these are different from Debian distribution. We have 4 directories here, and we have 2 directories, and both of them are pointed to the same directory, but here we have 4 different directories for different purposes. And I mean, these are different. And the other directory is MNT, which is empty directory, and it is good location when you want to mount your mount points, your devices, your disks, temporarily to do something. For example, when you want to install the Arch Linux, at first you mount your ISO to MNT and then chroot and the others. And for example, when you want to check an external disk, you plugged it on your Linux, and then you can mount it to this directory and use it. OPT directory is optional, and it belongs to you. You can put your in-house services, your programs there. And about the proc, about the sys, and about the run directory, I will talk a lot about these directories, especially because for proc directory, because it is an overview from the current state of your operating system, and it is really a helpful directory for performance tuning, for monitoring, and for seeing that what is going on your operating system. The root directory is the home directory of your root user. In Linux, you have a root user, which is the admin user, the main root user, and it has full permission for everywhere to do everything in your operating system. So this is a critical user. Then by this reason, it must have a separate home directory than the other regular users. SRV is the same of OPT for services, you can use it. And TMP directory is temporary directory. The content of this directory will be deleted after rebooting your operating system. And don't keep your permanent files here. And this is just for temporary purposes. And all the users have full permission at this directory. It's not safe directory to keep the sensitive data here. USR, which is a directory that contains the user-defined binaries and libraries, and everything which belongs to users should be at this directory. For example, the binaries, the shares, the documents, the manual files, and the others should be at this directory. And the var directory, everything which is changing on your operating system, like a log file, or like a database, or like a directory or a file which is changing continuously, and sometimes growing, sometimes deleting, and everything that you are changing in your services should be at this directory. For example, by default, the MySQL database directory is at this directory, and all the log files belong to system and services by default are at this directory. For example, the cache directory of your package manager by default is at this directory. And this is the var, and one of the most important directories in your operating system. So these are the mindset behind these directories in operating system. As you saw, to comparison with Debian and Arch Linux, they are different from each other. As I told, there is no must, and you are free. You will see some differences in different distributions at the structure of file system. And at the next step, one of the main and important responsibilities and things for a Linux system engineer is to know why some directories should be defined in separate partitions. So for the next step, I will talk and check from logical view to see that, in which case it is better to separate them in different partitions. The first directory was boot. I would say in 100% it doesn't matter what are you doing. It's your desktop, it's your operating system for server. In every situation, separate your boot directory in different partition because this directory is so sensitive, and when you want to, for example, configure your storage with LVM or the other technologies, which are the high-level technologies, and you are not able to partition your boot directory with LVM because LVM is not something that BIOS understand it and open it and find the first sector. And I will talk about the boot directory in next episodes and how it works. So in 100% separate this directory without any concern. And about the size, I will say that it belongs, but for me, if my goal is to keep only 1 or 2 kernel in my boot history, 500 megabytes should be okay, but 1 gigabyte also could be good. The next directory is /dev. Never and never in any case, you don't need to separate it in a different partition, because the dev directory is not something that changed continuously. It's one time and there is nothing special to be worried about that. The next directory is etc directory. The same, it's not good idea to separate the etc directory in different partition. Next directory is /home. And it depends if you are serving a server that you have some users that they want to log in your system, or in other case when you are using, for example, some services like Apache that you are going to serve a web service and Apache by default will keep the data in /home/www, then it is good idea to separate it in a different partition. But when you are serving a database, for example, MySQL, which no one will not log into your operating system, and everything is in another directory, so separating home directory is not good idea, but you can always do this. Or for example, when you are you want to install on your desktop environment, it's good idea, for example, if you separate this directory, because for example, imagine that you have Arch in your laptop installed and you want to change your distribution to, for example, Ubuntu. Then if you separate your home directory, you don't need to purge, and yeah, you will not be in trouble in migration from Arch to Ubuntu. Only the root directory and the boot directory is enough, I mean. So for user, good idea. For Apache Web Server, good idea. But for database, not good. And for desktop, good idea to separate the home directory in another partition, in different partition. Next partition is lib partition, same as etc. You don't need to separate it. For MNT, OPT, SRV, for these directories, you don't need to separate them since you are not doing something on them. I mean, for example, if you have a specific service, your in-house service that you written by yourself, and you want to locate it at this directory, at SRV. So at this case, it depends on your use case. It's good idea if you separate it in a different partition. But by default, when you are doing, you have nothing on them, so you are not worried about them. So for these directories, it depends that you like to separate them or not. But for MNT, of course, it's not good idea to separate them. At this case, do not separate the MNT in different partition because it's not a permanent mount point that you want to use it. It just will use for temporary purposes. For directories /proc /sys/run, definitely same as the dev in any situation. And yeah, the proc directory is not something that exists when your Linux is not running. It will be generated when your system is powered on. And yeah, no reason to separate them. For /root, the home directory of user root, I could not find any situation to tell you that, okay, that's good idea to separate it in a different directory, because there is no use case. There is nothing special at this directory. Only the sensitive data, which belongs to home user of the user root, will find at this directory, so no reason. And we have two main directories, /var and /tmp. I would say in 99% of cases, that's good idea to separate the var and tmp in different partitions. For the TMP, it's completely clear because the TMP directory is a directory that everyone has full permission to this directory, so that's good idea. And for a var, yeah, because we have a lot of important log files and we may want to keep our log files for months and years, or backups or caches or the others, or for example when we are serving database, in 100% I would say that, okay, if you are serving database, separate this directory. Now I wanted to ask a main question: why we should separate these directories in different cases, in different partitions? The answer is so simple. We want to keep our operating system in safe state. I would describe it with some examples. Imagine that you have a service and there is 1,000 users able to log into your Linux. And yeah, you have all your storage, like for example you have 300 gigabytes of data and all of them are in slash and nothing is separated. So you have 1000 users that they are able to log in to a Linux with 300 gigabytes of storage, and all of the storage is mounted under the slash. And I'm going to ask you a question. What will happen if one of these users copy and paste or build or generate, I don't know, a file by size of 200 gigabytes? What will happen? You have no control on the home directory of 1000 users, and you cannot control them. You can restrict them to some storage, but yeah, in some cases this is not a good answer. This is not the solution. What will happen? So your storage will be full up to 200 gigabytes. And what if another user comes and generates another file by the same size of 200 gigabytes? Then your root file system is overflow and you have no space left on your operating system. Then yeah, your system will be crashed and you will be in trouble as a Linux system administrator. So the answer for this question is we should separate We should separate the partitions, the directories, to different partitions that we have no control on that partitions. Let's back to our example. Here imagine that I have a database. Okay, that I have 500 gigabytes available storage on my operating system. Then I make the partition like this. I specify for boot 2 gigabytes and specify for root 30 gigabytes, and I specify for var, for example, the rest. I don't know how much is it. For example, 470 gigabytes. For example, the rest. Imagine that this is the rest of this amount. And yeah, so I am serving a database, and this database is critical, and some of the monitoring services is configured wrongly, and the debug mode in the service and in the process is enabled. So it's going to generate a huge files under var log directory. So by writing huge log files under this directory, for example test.log, and this file is going to be like, for example, 400 gigabytes, and then see what's happened. My partition, which is 470 gigabytes, is near to 95%, and yeah, I'm in trouble because there is a log file, a dummy log file, which is not configured correctly, and it fooled the varlog database, varlog partition. Then, since I didn't separate the varlog from var, or I didn't separate the varlog from my database directory, which is in var lib MySQL, then all of them are in the same partition, and I will get trouble for my database, which is the mandatory and the main service for this host. But if I separate the /var with /var log or with /var lib MySQL in different partitions, for example, specifying 50 gigabyte to this, for example, yeah, I don't know, 100 gigabyte to this, and the rest to var lib MySQL, then okay, this directory is going to full. It will not affect my database, and it will not affect my main service at this host. So the main goal from partitioning is the first thing, that separate your directories in different partitions when you are sure that you will not have control on the directory. For example, your TMP, your home directory, that you cannot control them for users and growing up the files and the others. And the other main reason is always keeping your operating system, your slash actually, in a safe state. This is the reason that we are going to separate different directories in different partitions, and it depends to the use case of your Linux and what you are going to do with your Linux. Now I want to talk about a scenario. For example, imagine I have a server and I want to make the server partition for different purposes in different situations. One time for database, one time for FTP, one time for mail, and one time for a web server. Without any checking that what is it, I always will separate the boot in different partition. It doesn't matter what is it. And also I will separate slash in different partition. For example, 30 gigabytes for all of them could be good and enough. And for database, I know that this is in var lib MySQL, okay, and I will separate it in a different storage, in a different partition, and also I will separate var directory in another different partition, because I'm sure that there might be some log files and I don't want to affect my slash directory slash partition by growing and changing some log files. And of course, separating the TMP. For FTP, I will separate the home directory, because I may have a lot of users which want to use the FTP server, and I want to jail them in their home directory, so I will separate the home directory. Of course, I will separate the TMP directory, and I have some public locations that I will serve some files in that directories without any without any permissions. So I will separate, for example, the srv ftp. Imagine that I'm serving my data from this directory. For mail server, same as FTP, sorry, we have a home directory because the users may have their home directory with their logins and they want to keep their mailboxes, files in the home directory. Of course, I will separate the var for the mail, and if I am serving some specific directory to keep some specific data in there, then I will separate the specific directory, same as the FTP. For the web directory, imagine that I am serving with Nginx. Of course, I will separate the home directory in different partition because I know that the default directory for serving the documents in Nginx web service is in home www, that's good idea to separate it. Of course, I will separate var and varlog. In this case, I will of course separate the TMP, and the same, I will separate the TMP. As you can see that var and TMP are in most of the scenarios, and that's really good idea to always separate these directories in different partitions. So we have 4 main directories that will be separated in different partitions. The first is boot, then slash, then var, and then TMP. These are good to separate in different partitions, but in some cases it depends, home directory and the others. And we are done here. Let me start from the top. What we talked about at this episode, we talked about the POSIX standard in structure of file system, and we talked about that, Linux is using the POSIX and follows the POSIX, and everything inside your operating system is file. It doesn't matter what is it, it's file and file base. And then we talked about the directories under the slash directory in operating system, and we talked about that you may see some differences between different distributions of Linux. Then we talked about the use cases and the mindset behind directories, and which one is better to be separate, to be in separate partition. And we talked about different scenarios, and also we checked in 4 sample different scenarios by default. But and just keep it in mind that there is no must. You are free to do whatever you want, and you are free to partition your operating system. And in most cases, it could be like this, that you have at least 4 main directories that you should separate them in 3 different partitions. And in some cases, some of them are not important, and in some cases are really important to be in separate partitions, and it depends on your use case and exactly what you want to do. Thank you for watching me. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this video with your friends. Till next episode, bye!